just added that little robot in there. um, yeah, today's going to be a little bit more interactive than I've been making some of the previous classes. So hopefully it's a little more fun. I'm trying to, yeah, just make it more engaging for everyone, because even I get bored of hearing myself just talk for half an hour or 45 minutes. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I got a couple of just updates for all of you from the organization, so I want to get through those. And just in case there's someone new watching this, I'll start with a full introduction this time. So I'm Farmer Rishi. I'm the executive director and founder of Sarvodaya Institute, the organization that you are a member of and that you're supporting every month with your dollars. And I really appreciate you joining us here and supporting our work. Just to give a little bit of an intro about our organization, the word Sarvodaya, it's a Sanskrit word, so one of the ancient languages of India, where my family originates from, and it combines two words actually. It means sarva and udaya, and sarva meaning all and udaya meaning rise. And so you put those together, it means all rise, or I translate it as upliftment of all, or that's the translation that I use, upliftment of all. And yeah, our work here at Sarvodaya Institute, that's really what we're about. We're use gardening and farming as a vehicle for this work of healing and regeneration that we see that we are all in need of, and we try to do that as best we can for everyone, and that includes people, plants, animals, birds, insects, soil, fungi. We're trying to work as holistically and deeply as we can. And one of the things that we talk about, and that actually we're working on a membership campaign around right now, is this idea of remember our role. And so what we mean by remember our role is that so much of what we've been taught, throughout our lives, by our culture, even by our language, is that we are separate from Earth, we are disconnected from Earth, and that now in this work of healing and maybe healing our planet and healing ourselves, what we're trying to do is reconnect with Earth, or reconnect with nature, this kind of external nature. And the reframing that we do as an organization is from reconnecting, which implies that you've been disconnected, to remembering, which says that no, you've never really been disconnected. You wake up on this planet every day. You eat everything. Everything you are is from Earth. Everything you eat is from Earth. You are Earth. Your memories are Earth. Your emotions are Earth. You are Earth in motion. And so it's not so much of reconnecting, but remembering what your role is, remembering what uplifts you, remembering what gives you joy, and remembering how you can care for our planet, and how we can care for each other and be compassionate towards each other. So that's another kind of slogan that we're working with here, remember our role. And that's going to be the slogan of our upcoming membership drive, which we are trying to put together. Another part of our work is just to pay people of color to be engaged with this work. So our farm staff and our nursery staff are all people of color. Most of our staff are people of color. And a lot of what membership contributions go toward are just paying our staff. Running an urban farm and a nursery, very challenging work, very challenging to maintain financially. And so a lot of the membership contributions simply go towards paying our staff salary. And we have some new staff that is starting up this month, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Um, but yeah, this is what we are what we're doing, what you're supporting with your money, and what we try to give back to all of our supporters is the knowledge that we are learning through our work of maintaining our farms and our gardens and interacting with our community. I want to just share one story today too, just as a little bit of a maybe like a message of hope. Um, when we got onto our farm in 2014, 2014 was when we first got access to the land that is now Sarvodaya Farms. And when we got there, the land had just been completely, neglected, abused, forgotten for years. It was like it kind of was like a desert. The soil had just been tilled and tilled and tilled. There was no plant life, no roots, no animals, nothing. It was just totally maybe what you would say empty. Um, and the last couple of weeks, with all the work that we've done over the years to introduce, to feed the soil, introduce plants and trees and flowering plants, and starting our nursery, and having people come and learning and engaging with land in this way of remembrance. Um, the last couple of weeks we've been picking morel mushrooms. We've picked about 25 morel mushrooms in the last couple of weeks, and if you're unfamiliar with morels, they're this very gourmet mushroom, very, very expensive. I think they're fresh like $70 or $80 a pound, and that's because the reason they're so expensive is because unlike some of the mushrooms that you can get in the grocery store, like your button or your cremini or your oyster mushrooms, morel mushrooms cannot be cultivated in isolation. So, all these other mushrooms, you can kind of grow them in a jar of medium. Morel mushrooms are usually found in forests. They're not in, they're very difficult to cultivate in this kind of isolated environment. And so, what a lot of times, if you read about morel mushrooms, they say, oh, these mushrooms they're not cultivatable. You can't grow them. And that's, to me, the idea of what they're saying there is that you can't grow them in isolation, right? But you can, turn or work with your soil, remember how to engage with land and with people in a way that creates a forest. And in that forest, you'll find morel mushrooms, right? So that's, for me, that's what we're really trying to convey through our work, is that, a lot of what we've been told about what is possible and what we're capable of is just, to be very frank, it's just bullshit. And we're trying to break through the bullshit. So that's my story. So like I mentioned, we have our full-time farm and nursery manager. Her name is Faye Nam. She is going to be starting next week at the farm, which we're really excited about. That also means that we have a pretty large new financial obligation. And along with that, we are going to be offering the meditation class that we've been offering. From now forward, that meditation class is going to be free to low-income community members around the farm, specifically in the city of Pomona. So these are two things that we could really use financial support in, being able to pay Faye's salary and being able to offer the meditation class. We're trying to just offer more reduced price or free offerings to especially the local community members who are hosting us. So if you have any additional funds and you feel like you could raise your membership level, by, if you're at the $5 a month level and you can go to the $10 a month, or if you're at the 10 and you want to go to the 20 or even above that, please let us know. You can email Delaney or me. The email address is just membership@sarvodiainstitute.org. I'm just going to type that in the chat here. Membership@sarvodiainstitute.org. If you want to up your membership level, we would really, really appreciate it. And that would do so much to support everything that we're trying to create. And as our monthly income increases, we hope to be offering some more free and reduced price offerings. We're hoping that once the school year starts back up, that we can even do like a monthly school field trip, try to bring at least one class in from the Pomona Unified School District for a field trip to the farm at no cost. So just some things that we're trying to build towards, and it's hard to get that those regular contributions going. So if you can up your membership level at any amount, we would really, really appreciate it. Okay, and last little thing, we've added and moved around some of the membership benefits. You're going to get an email about that from us soon. So everything you've been getting, you're going to continue to get. The new things are that at the $5 a month level, you're also going to get, we've created membership pages for each of the membership levels where you'll be able to access your benefits. So there's going to be a couple of the basic these monthly gardening lessons available at the $5 a month level. Then there's going to be additional lessons available at the $10 a month level. And then at the $20 a month level, you'll have access to all of the past classes, which there are almost 12 now. And those will be available on your membership page. We have also reached out to a bunch of eco product companies and asked them to extend some discounts to our members. We got about 15 companies on board with that. So everyone's going to get access to these discounts, and that includes seed companies. We have some, cosmetic companies. We have some book publishers. We have Hip Camp. So if you want to take a vacation and go glamping, you can use Hip Camp to book a little family vacation. So a bunch of cool benefits, and you can access those through that new membership page that you'll get in your email. You'll also keep getting links to that membership page every time your membership renews. It'll be in that renewal email that you're getting. Okay, cool. All right, that was a lot of stuff, just a lot of kind of administrative stuff and introduction stuff, but very exciting. We're happy to share it with you. And now I want to get into the topic of the month. So today we're going to be talking about water and irrigation. Something that I feel like there's a significant amount of confusion around, especially when people are starting off gardening. So I want to just clarify a lot of that confusion, give you some some small tips that can kind of help you on a day-to-day basis, but also give you like a broader overview of what you need to understand when we're talking about plants and soil and water, because these are, if you try to look at these things really scientifically, it can get really, really confusing. So I'm gonna give you a way to look at it more relationally, and hopefully that relational way is much easier to comprehend and digest. Okay. I want to hear from you all about what your questions would be about water. But I just want to bring up these kind of two questions that I get the most when it comes to water in a garden, especially from new gardeners. And the first question is, when should I water? How often should I water? Right? oh, like, do I, should I water one every day? Should I water every other day? Should I water, every 3 days? When do I water, right? And that, I just want to bring that up in to say that that is not actually a helpful way for us to understand water in our garden. There's no fixed schedules for anything in gardening, just like you don't have a fixed schedule of when you need to drink water. Plants don't have a fixed schedule of when they want to drink water, right? Like I drink water. I now try to drink water, throughout the day a little bit, and then, especially when I'm thirsty, but I'm not like, okay, I need a drink at 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m., like that doesn't work for me. I just try to drink water when I feel like I need water. And so we gotta use the same framework that we use for ourselves when we apply to when we're looking at our garden. That's something you'll hear me say a lot, because gardens are gardens, and plants and soil. These are all living beings, just like us. They're, even they respirate like us, they breathe like us, they drink like us, they have they excrete things like we do. So, we all kind of function very really similarly. And then the second question I get a lot is, how much water does this plant need? Especially this is in the context of when we're at the nursery and someone says, how much water does this plant need? That's like a really, really difficult question to answer, because, how much water the plant needs depends on everything, right? Like, how much water do you need? How much water do you need on a hot day? How much water do you need on a hot day in the sun? How much water do you need on a hot day in the shade? How much water do you need, in the winter? Like, how much water do you need after you ran? Like, all, how much water does this plant need? Like, I don't know how to answer that question. So again, that's not the most helpful framework. I'm gonna try to give you some other frameworks. But yeah, so let me take a minute here and just ask you all, what do you want, if you have any questions about water, or things that you would want to have answered or for me to go over, let me know right now. You can either put it in the chat, or if you are willing to speak up, you can raise your hand. There's this reactions button on the bottom right hand corner of your screen, and then you can click raise hand, and then that'll let me call on you. So Linda.
Yes. Well, I think that when people ask how much water does the plant need, they're not talking about a gallon a day or that kind of thing. I think of in terms of, if I'm going to be buying something that's drought tolerant, that they say maybe you water it once or twice a month with a drip kind of system, or maybe the soil has to be kept a little damp. So maybe you might plant it on the north side of a building where it's not going to dry out as fast. So I think it's how you look at that. And I agree with you. You can't just say it needs so much water. The other thing that I want to actually thank you for personally is for looking at this whole concept of nature and human beings not being part of it, and us being of the earth instead. I read everything you said. I believe it was yesterday or the day before, and I thought it was excellent. And I'm going to up my level just to support that. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I did make a post online yesterday, and it's been getting quite a lot of feedback. So if you got a chance to read it, wonderful. I hope it did something for you. If you haven't, you can go check it out. It's on my Instagram. I also just posted it to my website, my personal website, farmerrishi.com, if you want to read it there. And yeah, and in regards to the water, you're absolutely right. There are certain plants that are wetland plants, so that they're going to need to be kept moist really continuously. There are certain plants that are really that like to be watered super infrequently. So yeah, we can kind of give some advice around individual plants in that way. And I think, yeah, the perception that I was speaking to, which I get a lot from new gardeners, new customers at the nursery is they're asking more for a prescription. And so, yeah, in gardening, prescriptions just don't work. I feel like in life, prescriptions don't work really well. And we need to just be responsive and listening. Listening and paying attention are one of the most important things. And that 100%, 120% applies to plants and water. Okay. Does anyone else have a question? I didn't see any other hands go up. And if you're having trouble with the raise hand thing, feel free to just unmute yourself to ask a question. Janine.
There. Thank you so much, Farmer Rishi, for all of this. So 2 questions. One I wrote in the chat, but I can repeat. And one is just, is the idea of like putting your finger in the soil, especially like with potted, pots, and if it's like dry 1 inch down, then that's a good indicator that it's ready for some water. Does that depend a lot on the plants also?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually planning on going over that, but since you brought it up now, I'll just answer. Yeah, so especially with potted plants, that's something that I use myself. I just stick my finger in, and so I don't water if it's dry like down 1 inch. I'll water if it's dry like down to the point where my fingertip is. So I let at least that much dryness happen actually.
Okay.
And I'll kind of explain why that is today.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a perfect example of what I would call listening, right? It's listening to the soil, and you can sometimes the more you're with your garden, the more you're paying attention, then you might be able to just look at the plants and see, oh, it's time for them to water. But when you're new, then having a really like physical way of like, okay, I'm just going to stick my finger in the soil and see how far dry it is. That's a even more direct way of listening than being able to visually identify that, okay, now it's time to water. And it's just whatever works for you at whatever level you're at, right? Like, I think the more you spend time with your garden, the more you're paying attention and listening to what's happening, you'll be able to see, oh, this is time to water without even having to stick your finger in, right?
Great, thank you. The other question is kind of a different one, but I just heard this recently and I wondered your input on it. I'm just wondering if there's evidence that having, really good soil with the humus and all the wonderful things that we're doing to take care of the soil is helpful in fire prevention or in reducing the spread of wildfires because the soil is holding more moisture.
Oh yeah, I mean that I would say is indisputable. The more the more organic matter, the more root mass, the more plant life that there is above ground, the more moisture that's being held in the soil, then yeah, we're gonna have fewer or less intense fires.
Cool, thank you.
Also, I would just to clarify too, like there's also certain practices that we can see, especially from indigenous Californian peoples were really great at this, of making sure that even when you like plants, I mean plants are what's burning in a wildfire, right? And so part of the practice of indigenous Californian people was that before the dry, hot season started, when fires could really, erupt and break out, they would lower or remove the amount of dry material above ground by either, chopping those plants down or grazing them or burning them, right? And so that would remove the amount of dry plant matter above ground and reduce the amount of fire. So it's an important, it's not just like we have more plants, there's less fire. It's also, we have more plants and we are paying attention to, okay, we are in a fire prone area. How can we still manage these plants to reduce the likelihood of like catastrophic fires?
So, I mean, what you said made sense on both ends. And I'm also wondering, what about if they're going to chop down part of the plants? I live in the Northwest, so usually that's not an issue. Although recently it's been another story. But, and then putting that in the ground as compost.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the part where you said chop down part of the.
So if they're chopping down, they're lowering the vegetation that's above ground,
Mhm.
could they then mix that into the soil so that it's composting the soil and it's being utilized in that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I learned, when I was talking to they're actually someone who worked for the California Conservation Corps, and these guys actually go out and they kind of prune the the more unmanaged areas of land in California. And one of the things they do is just they keep tree limbs like away from the ground. So any trees that are their limbs are hanging too close to the ground, they'll clear them so there's a gap between the ground and the tree. And then they'll just lower brush, right? Because the height of the plant material is what creates like the raging fires. If you just take all that, dried plant material at the end of the spring and you just put it to the ground, the fire won't burn so hot. It'll more like low and smolder. So yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. It's amazing how fast this hour can go by. So I want to move on a little bit to what I've prepared here. So let's see, where did I want to start? Okay. Yeah. So one thing, which is another like kind of funny idea that I want to maybe dispel is this idea of how water functions in a garden, or how plants and humans and animals use water. Because what we're taught a lot is that like, okay, this plant consumes this much water and this animal consumes this much water, right? Like we have these like diagrams of like, okay, a lettuce takes, this much water to grow, and a chicken takes this much water to grow, and an egg takes this much water to grow. And when you look at that diagram, like it doesn't tell you that after the chicken, or like let's use a cow, like after a cow drinks that water, it just pees it all right out, right? Right? Like it's not like the water disappears, right? When the chicken drinks water, the chicken also just, they don't pee, they poop. Like the chicken poops it all out. And when we drink water, we just pee the water right back out too, right? Like we don't consume the water is not destroyed when we use it. And the same thing with your plants, like the plants don't destroy the water. It's not like the water just disappears after you water your plant, right? So what happens when you water your plant, right? The water first goes into the soil. In the soil, it's a lot of that water can stay in the soil for a significant amount of time. Some of that water then can go up and be taken up into the plant. Then the water moves through the plant. Then after the water moves through the plant, now it's in the air, right? It's the water is transpired by the plant, and the water is now in the air. And where does the water go from the air? Well, yes, some of that water is going to like blow, not really blow away, maybe blow next door or blow down the street, but that water is going to remain in the air, right? And then actually, especially in a dry climate like ours, at night when the air cools down, that water is going to sink back down to the ground as dew, right? So we're not really, I mean, not real, like we don't consume water. Plants don't consume water. Water is not lost because you watered your plant. Water is just in her cycle, right? And I want to give you a really like clear example of this. And if you've been in some of my other classes, I've done this. I do this in all my classes, and I find it's really helpful for people. So you'll see this again. But I need a volunteer, someone who can. It's a really quick thing. Okay. Yeah, Linda, go ahead. Just unmute yourself.
All right, shoot.
Okay. All right. It's really easy. Okay. So I have some water in this bottle here, and I'm going to pour some of this water out. And I know you can't see the ground, but I want you to tell me how long it takes for this water to hit the ground.
About 3 seconds.
Maybe maybe less than a second, I would say, but.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I can't tell how far you were off the ground.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty close to the ground.
Yeah, well, if you're 3 feet, a second or two, yeah.
Okay.
If you're 6 feet tall, then maybe a little more.
Okay, that's perfect. And now I want you to tell me how long it's going to take the water to hit the ground in this next scenario.
Uh, 6 to 12 hours.
Exactly, right? It's going to take
Something like that. I don't know. It depends on the size of your bladder.
Yeah, exactly. So we can't tell for sure, right? But what we do know is that it's going to take a significantly longer time for the water to hit the ground if the water has to pass through me.
Yes.
Right? And the water is not being destroyed by passing through me. The water is not being polluted by passing through me. In fact, I'm going to enrich this water with some nutrients. Now, those nutrients that I'm enriching the water with aren't the same nutrients that I want to have back, right? I'm trying to get rid of those nutrients.
Right. But there's other nutrients that water is putting into your cells.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And then
it's lubricating your body, because what are you, like 80% water?
I believe so. Yes. And so the water is providing me with something, and then I'm actually putting something back in the water, right? And then that nutrition that I'm putting back in the water isn't the nutrition for me, but it is actually the nutrition for a lot of the beings in my garden, right?
Yes.
The plants. Plants actually love, especially certain plants really love when you pee on them, and I try to pee as much in my garden as I can.
Good to know.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Linda, for participating here. That was the extent of it. Yeah. So this just to say that water, she's not being destroyed by your garden. She's not being destroyed by your plants. She's not being destroyed by you, by any of the insects in your garden, any animals in your garden. Actually, she wants to hang out with you, right? Like, if you just pour the water on the ground, then the water is going to say, like, all right, I'm out of here, right? I'll find the next person who wants to hang out with me. But you pour the water in your mouth, or you pour the water in the soil, or you pour the water on a plant, and water actually loves to slow down and hang out, right? So when I pour that water, when I drink the water hangs out for like 6 hours. Actually, today it's felt more like 45 minutes. but yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it goes from 1 second to 45 minutes or 2 hours. And so actually, the way that we've been taught to think about plants is that they consume water. And so the more plants we have, we're going to need more water. when actually it's kind of the reverse. And the more plants we have, the more friends water has to hang out with. And so she can pass from one plant to the next, to the next, to the next. She can, transpire. She can come back as dew. She can return to the ground. She can then come back again. Now she's, she goes into a fruit, and the insect is eating that fruit, and the bird is eating that insect, and the bird is pooping back in the ground. And now the water is going back up into another plant, or the water is just hanging out in the soil for a really long time. Like when soil has a lot of, when soil is really healthy and has lots of microbes and fungi and insects and worms, those are all like water friends, and water loves to hang out with those guys. So if your soil's got lots of those, water friends inside, then water actually loves to stay and hang out in soil for like really, really long periods of time. So, all of this to say that we just have to reframe the way that we think about water, and that it's not so much about, again, it's not that more plants is more water. It's really about how the relationship between all the beings in the plant, and are they talking to each other? Are they communicating with each other? Are they passing gifts back and forth with each other? Then that water is going to stay cycling around the garden. And actually, we can use really, really little water to grow a really abundant garden. And just as an example from one of our gardens, I don't think I've done. I should do like a tour for you guys of the garden that we did at in Claremont. So we have one of our demonstration gardens is at a Quaker meeting house in Claremont, California, and they used to have a lawn. It was 7,500 square feet of lawn. We converted that 7,500 square feet of lawn into this really, it's actually like, it's so beautiful, that garden right now. There's 70 fruit trees, there's 10 grapevines, there's like a couple hundred native plants, and then in the spring we have all these wildflowers. And we've been harvesting like several hundred pounds of fruit from that garden for the past 2 years. It's only 6 years old now. But all of that we're growing in that garden, I mean, I'm talking like when you go there now, it really is starting to look like a short forest, and it uses 20% of the water that they used to use for having a lawn. So we had an 80% reduction in the water that the Quaker meeting was buying to have this like super lush food, native plant garden. And really, all the main change that we made, like, yes, we installed drip irrigation instead of sprinklers, but what the major change is just in that relation, and like creating that space that water wants to hang out. Because even if we don't water for several weeks, we've had times where they had to do some irrigation, some water repairs, like on the main line, and the water was off for like 3 or 4 weeks in the summer. And yeah, like the plants got a little bit stressed by the end of it, but they weren't dead, right? And actually, when you dug down in the soil, you could still find some moisture, even like 6-8 inches down, because water wants to hang out in that garden. And that's what we're trying to do is, and this kind of applies across the board, right? Like, we want water to hang out in our garden, we want insects to hang out in our garden, we want birds to hang out in our garden, we want us to hang out in our garden. Like, we just want to slow that energy down and give everyone the space to kind of relax and be comfortable. And that's how we build up energy in the garden. We just have a lot of beings, making their home there and enjoying themselves. So that's, I know I'm like, I can be really vague and not tell you any specific instructions, but I really try to start with the framework, right? So the framework is really important, and then a lot of the practical stuff comes out of that. Yeah, so some very practical things, to get started with, and this is, what we've talked about in so many other of these classes, is that, especially when you're starting your garden, working on feeding the soil is really important. Putting, really significant amounts of compost in the ground. So usually for a new garden, I'm adding like 4 to 6 inches of compost, which I'm usually buying from a local compost supplier, just as an initial, like, hey, sorry you haven't been fed in like 20 years. Here's a bunch of food, and just to get you like back up and and feeling a little better again. So compost, mulch, and then slowly we're adding in the plants that are going to be, plants are a really important friend of water, and so we need to have plants in the garden, and that's the beginning of creating a healthy space for water in your garden. Okay, and then of course, we have we're gonna, in wherever you are, you're gonna be getting some rainwater. Some of us are going to be getting lots of regular rainwater, in which case, maybe we can actually rely almost entirely on rainwater and a little bit of hand watering. And in other places, we're going to get, like where I am in California, we get our water, our rainwater, we get primarily in a very short window of about 3 to 4 months. And that window is also now like really scattered and all over the place. And this year we had, I think it only rained like 3 or 4 days the entire last year. So in these drier climates, we're going to be relying more on irrigation, right? But in any case, we want to make sure that when we do get rainwater, that rainwater is accepted into the garden. And again, the main way that we can accept rainwater into the garden is just let it soak in right where she falls, which means again that we're going to have soil that's healthy, that's been fed, that has roots growing in it, that has cover, some kind of either plant cover or mulch. And I want you to just like take a second here and just kind of visualize. And if you want to close your eyes for a second, I'm going to close my eyes. I want you to just like visualize rain falling. Okay, and first let's start with a garden that hasn't been started yet, right? So just soil, right? Soil, and it's like a hard and it's like a dry soil, and there's very little plants, right? And I think even if you don't have a lot of experience gardening, you should be able to do this. So you're going to visualize this rain falling on this garden, right? And where does the rain land, right? And for me, I'm seeing like the rain is just landing right on the soil, and I'm seeing like these kind of like splashes on the ground, and I'm seeing the rain like can't get in, and there's so much of it coming at the same time, and that like excess water that can't get in is kind of building up, and then it's just falling off to whatever side the slope is, right? And now if we kind of build this garden, plant the trees and the flowers, and we create all these layers in the garden. So you have, taller trees and shorter trees and shrubs and grasses and mulch, and you have birds and insects, right? Now you start to build your garden out. And now again, let the rain fall, right, on your garden. And see how differently she acts this time, right? I'm gonna give you a second, and then I'll kind of describe what I'm seeing. So what I'm seeing is, this rain is falling and it's landing on like the top leaves of this tree, and then like the drops are collecting in the leaves in one leaf, and then they're pouring onto like the next set of leaves, and then they're collecting in those leaves, and then they're pouring onto another set of leaves, and they're slowly just, it's like little cups kind of pouring into each other, making their way through the canopy. And now after they've come through the canopy, you got this like big drop and it falls onto a bush below. And now that, that same thing is happening, this water is kind of running, it lands on a leaf, but then it starts running down a branch, and now it's running down the trunk of the bush, and now it's like getting to the bottom of the trunk. And all the while, like there's stuff, water is sticking everywhere, right? Like there's water stuck in the tree, there's water stuck in the bush, there's water stuck on the trunk, right? And now finally, like that little last drip of water is coming down the trunk, and it's just very like slowly and gently kind of making its way into the mulch, and then just really slowly and gently coming down into the soil. And the soil's like soft and spongy, and so you can see, so you see like as the rain keeps falling, the water just really slowly is like coming down softly, and then it's filling up the soil, right? Like it's filling up this sponge in the soil, and that water is not really being lost anywhere. It's just soaking into this sponge. And now, like, even as the sun comes out and the rain stops, there's still so much water in this garden, right? Like the trees are wet, the plants are wet, the ground is wet, and then even under the surface of the ground, there's this huge like cake, like this moist chocolate cake that has tons and tons of water, right? And that's like gonna feed the garden for the next several months. Okay, oh, that was nice. I enjoyed that. Yeah, so this is what we're trying to build in the garden, right? Is like this ability to just slow and soak, and that's really important wherever we are, and whether we are primarily relying on rainwater or not. And again, and now, just to move on to irrigation, for those of us who are in California, especially, or dry climates, we are going to need to irrigate, right? We're going to need to irrigate quite a bit. We're going to need to irrigate pretty regularly. So, how do we know when to do that? How often? And this goes back to, for me, this goes back to what Janine's question earlier of really just paying attention to the plant, to the soil, and getting like kind of physical with it, right? So, when do you need to water? Well, I can give you some general guidelines, like the deeper the roots of a plant, right? So if we're talking about a tree, trees are going to have, not just deeper roots, but more spread out roots. They're just going to have more roots in general, right? So the deeper and more spread out the roots of a plant, the less often you need to water that particular plant, and the more deeply you should water that plant. So generally, my recommendation for any tree, when we're irrigating a tree, is that we irrigate really, really slowly. So if you're going to do it with a hose, you're going to put it on a very slow leak, like just a trickle coming out of the hose, and then you're going to leave that running for several hours. Okay, so that might be, and this is going to depend on It's going to depend on your soil, on the temperature, on how old the tree is, and how big how deep the roots are, all that. Like, it's very hard to just give you some kind of prescription, right? But so you can do some experimentation and see what's working for your tree. So you're going to water real slow and for a really long time, like several hours. You know, you could do it for even a day and then not water again for a month. So slow, deep, and long. The deeper the roots of a plant are. On the other side, if we have a shallow rooted plant like a lettuce, you know, when I pull out lettuce plants, like usually the roots aren't much deeper than about a foot. And even a foot would be quite deep for a lettuce plant. Sometimes they're just like 4 or 5 inches. So for a lettuce plant, you know, that's a very shallow root. So if there's no moisture in that first 5-6 inches, then that plant's going to suffer, right? So for a lettuce plant, you want to be watering more often and more shallowly, right? So for our, for our vegetables at our farm, we pretty much water, everything's on a mechanical system or automatic system, and we basically water every other day on our vegetables because we're trying to keep that surface layer really moist, right? And that's going to be the same thing like if you just planted a tree and you just took it out of the pot, the roots are only this big, about usually they're about a foot and a half deep, then you need to water that fruit tree. Even though it's a tree, you need to water it more often until those roots are able to establish, right? So I kind of, and I put the plant, when I'm designing an irrigation system, which I can't get into all that today, but I put the plants that need similar watering requirements on the same schedule. Okay, so deep roots, less often, more water. Shallow roots, water them more often and give them less water, right? And one thing, when you're doing this, one thing to pay attention to is how fast your soil can drink. Okay, so I can drink that fast, right? If you were to take a bucket and start pouring water into my mouth, you would start to drown me, and I can't drink water that fast. So if you put 5 gallons, if you give me 5 gallons of water this way, I'm going to take all 5 gallons of water. If you take a 5-gallon bucket of water and pour it on me, I'm only going to get, like a teaspoon of, like a tablespoon of water, right? So how you water even matters. And that's why I recommended just doing a really slow leak on a hose or using a drip irrigation system, because then that water can really slowly soak in. And so you can really, you can kind of water as fast as your soil can drink. So this is pretty easy to visually understand too. You turn the hose on, you put it on the ground, you see how fast that water is able to absorb into the soil. And as much as you can only go up to as much as your soil can drink. Don't go past that. Try to actually go less than that. But as your soil gets richer and more accepting of water, you will be able to actually water faster. You'll be able to put more water down at once. When you're starting off, go slow. Go really slow. Okay, so for those of you who would like to install a drip irrigation system, I have a guide that I've written that has all that information in there. That's not something that I offer for free just because I spent a lot of time on it, and it's kind of beyond the scope of the monthly contributions that you also lovingly give. So I'm going to put the link to my drip irrigation guide in the chat. I'll also have Delaney email it with the follow-up to this class. It is $50, but it's totally worth it if you're going to install drip irrigation. I guarantee you I will save you more than $50. And it has it's got a bunch of diagrams, all the parts you need, where to order the parts from. It's very comprehensive, and if you have any questions, you can always send me an email about it. So that's there for those of you who would like to put in a drip irrigation system. You know, personally, because we're in California, all of our gardens have automated drip irrigation systems. It makes sense for the climate and also, you know, just the amount of space that we have. This would be very, very difficult to hand water, you know, a half-acre farm in California. So having an automated system is really helpful. You know, you can water with sprinklers as well. With sprinklers, it's going to be really important that you work on that soil health aspect, because sprinklers just throw out water so fast that if your soil's not able to absorb the water, most of it ends up evaporating or running away, right? So sprinklers, if your soil's not in an amazing shape, you're going to lose a lot of the water. And it's not terribly difficult to convert to drip. The other thing with sprinklers is just that a lot of times, you know, they're watering the leaves, or if, you know, they're on the edge of your property or something, they're watering the sidewalk, or they're watering the neighbor's yard, or they're watering the street. So drip kind of avoids a lot of those problems. It is, you know, drip has its own problems. When there's a sprinkler leak, like, you know, there's water shooting 20 feet up in the air, it's very obvious. With a drip irrigation system, when there's a leak, it's a lot of times not obvious, and you won't figure it out until your water bill is like double, because water is just pouring out in the ground somewhere. So they both have their trade-offs. And, you know, you can also hand water. Hand watering is definitely like the most precise, just like the most difficult to keep up with on a, you know, on a larger scale garden. If you have a small garden with pots, or a small in-ground garden, hand watering can definitely work. And also if you have like a neighbor that can do things while you're away. Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna say for today, and I'll just take questions now for the next 15 minutes or so. So just to reiterate, if you have any questions, you can click the reactions button on the bottom right hand of the screen, and then click raise hand, and I will call on you. And if you are shy and you want to put it in the chat, I can do that too. Tapper, yeah, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, I have a couple questions. As far as the urine, I heard that you had, or I read that you have to leave it for maybe 24 hours for some chemicals to evaporate. Is that true?
No. So urine is really strong, is really like a very high in nitrogen. It's very strong. Like the more yellow your urine is, the more nitrogen is actually in there. And so what can happen is I've yet to figure out a way to speak about this in non-scientific terms, but basically nitrogen, especially nitrogen in urine, when you pee on a plant or when you put it on a plant, the plant almost has to take it up if there's not the carbon to balance it out. Let me start that over. So yeah, if your soil is low in organic matter, meaning your soil doesn't have that like dark chocolatey color to it, and you pee on that soil, then the nitrogen is forced to go up into the plant rather than being absorbed by the soil. And when that nitrogen goes up into the plant, you can get what's called nitrogen burn. You can damage the plant with the urine. So if your soil is low in organic matter, your soil doesn't have that dark chocolate color, then one of the things you can do is just dilute the urine. You can mix it 1:20 and then water that way. So that way that nitrogen gets diluted, and then a larger amount of plants can absorb it. If your soil is really rich in carbon, so it's got a nice dark chocolate color, and you pee right on it, you're probably fine. You won't get nitrogen burn. You'll just be feeding into this kind of reservoir of nitrogen in the soil that will slowly feed into the plant. So, if you have a potting soil, for example, potting soil is usually like 100% organic matter. You can pee into potting soil straight. You're not going to get nitrogen burn. But if you're peeing into the soil in the ground that has never been fed, never been cared for, you can get that burn. It's also just a good idea if you're going to be peeing in your garden to not pee in the same spot and kind of move yourself around.
Okay, can you tell me a specific plant that can use that?
Anything that's got like big leafy green leaves would be a great candidate for urine.
Okay, I have grandsons that like to go out in the yard.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, are you in California?
Yes, Lakewood
Yeah,
area.
Sorry, where?
Lakewood area.
Lakewood area. Does it get, do you get frost on the ground?
No,
Okay.
it's close. It's similar to where you are.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not familiar with Lakewood particularly. But you could grow bananas. Bananas love pee. You could actually pee probably unlimited amount on a banana and be fine.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I see my grandfather's on. He's raising his hand, and he loves to pee in the garden too. You want to say something, Nana? You got to unmute yourself. Let me see. Okay. Anyone else have any more questions? Nana, you got to unmute if you want to talk. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. Okay, Tapra? All right, so let me do Sarah Joe first, and I'll come back to you, Tapra.
Okay. This was just a quick question about the nitrogen. So I actually have 2 blueberries growing in the ground, and they're still pretty young. And everybody just keeps saying, they better to grow them in pots. But with nitrogen, is that like because they, I guess, like sort of acidic soil? And so this is like a couple things. Like I also then was like reading up about that, and the more organic matter you have in your soil, supposedly that make it more acidic. And just that question about nitrogen and whether, like what would be good things for blueberry plants if you want to try to grow them, in our soil here that's not so acidic as in other places?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Yeah, so blueberries, they're a little bit challenging to grow in the ground just because of the acidity. So if you're in a low rain area like Southern California, then your soil is going to tend to be acidic or alkaline. Sorry, your soil will tend to be alkaline. If you're in a high rain area like the Pacific Northwest or
where you speak, you'll be able to hear.
I think anywhere in like the Northeast even, you're going to have more acidic soil because rain tends to be slightly acidic. And that's where blueberries will do well. So if you're going to try to grow blueberries, in California, you need to acidify the soil. And one of the ways to do this is to grow them in pots and to just grow in straight. What we are growing them in is a 80% to 20% mixture of peat moss and compost. That's what we're growing our potted blueberries in. And peat moss is acidic. And the reason you keep it in a pot is because even if you were to put the peat moss in the ground when you plant it, that, you know, worms and all the insects and all would slowly like disperse that peat moss into the soil and you'd lose the acidity. So that's why they recommend to keep it in a pot. There are things that you can do to, you basically need to continuously acidify the soil if you have it in the ground. And the way that you do that is sulfur. You add sulfur. I can't remember what form of sulfur that you'd use because I haven't done it actually. But there is like a sulfur fertilizer or soil acidifier that you can put around the plants. You'd have to do that somewhat regularly, I think. And then you can use like acid lovers, you know, type of fertilizers. Those will have some sulfur in it. But I think with blueberries, from what I've read, you need to like add a significant amount of sulfur, especially to start with.
Because I do feed it a special blueberry food, or you know, it's like a fruit fertilizer that's for blueberries. But yeah, I don't know. It's like this will be the first. One of them is like, I don't know, it's been in the ground for less than 5 months or something like that. And the other one is a little bit longer, maybe almost closer to 9 months. And I don't know if I should just move them into pots or just give it a try and see if the fertilizing them you know, it's kind of, at what point are you just, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny actually you're asking this because I went to a blueberry farm in Temecula over the weekend.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that anyone had a blueberry farm in California. But yeah, these guys had a blueberry farm in Temecula in the ground. They weren't organic or anything, but I know that it was just, you know, they had these like 5-foot tall blueberry bushes just covered in blueberries. And I didn't know that that was even possible in California. So there is some way to do it. But maybe you should call the Temecula Blueberry Farm and ask them for advice.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Yeah, Tapper, you got one more question?
Okay, I have a lime tree, Barras, and last year there was something that ate trails in the lime skin, and they didn't get very big. In the winter, I pruned it back, and right now it looks like the leaves are having a hard time to come out of the wood. They're there trying to break out, but you know, it's like they're stuck in the emergent stage and can't come out.
Huh, okay. Did it lose its leaves over the winter, or this is just the new leaves you're talking about?
These are the new leaves trying to come out. It doesn't have a lot of the old leaves because I really pruned it. But
Okay, you pruned it. Okay. I mean and you've put some compost around the tree and mulched the ground.
yes, actually there's wandering Jew growing all around it. I mean, it's covered, you know.
Right.
And I put a fertilizer spike.
A fertilizer spike.
Yes, a citrus tree fertilizer.
Okay. How's the soil like when you dig into it around the tree? Easy to dig into, or it's kind of hard?
No, it's easy to dig into.
Easy to dig into? Okay. Yeah, that's a little bit of a difficult one to diagnose. That sounds like just like an overall tree health issue. So, general advice I could give you is to get like 2 to 3. They usually come in like 2 cubic foot bags, like 2 to 3 2 cubic foot bags of compost. Spread it around the base of the tree in like a 5-foot diameter or so. You can kind of shake it through the wandering Jew if needed to. They got to change the name of that plant too. And then give a long, slow, deep watering, like maybe put it on a trickle and just leave it for 24 hours and give it a nice deep soak. And then, something that we do we do this for all of our plants in the summer is we feed them through their leaves with a foliar spray. We use this product called Neptune's Harvest.
I have.
And you can spray that in a dilution on the leaves. I know you don't have a lot of leaves, but you can still spray it on whatever leaves are there. And you can spray that on the soil too. If you want more guidance, then maybe you could send me a picture and I can answer for you.
Okay. Is it the Farmer Rishi email?
Yeah, you could send it to that.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe one more question from someone else.
I did the, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. This is Tapper. I did the blueberries. I did them in pots, and I did buy the moss and the compost and the fertilizer. And also, if you mix 1 teaspoon with a gallon of water, a teaspoon of vinegar, white vinegar with a gallon of water, that also helps with the acidity too.
Oh,
So
okay.
far, 5.
Okay, cool. Good. That's good to hear. Some advice for you, Sarah Jo. We're doing ours in just the peat moss mix, and they're doing pretty well. Yeah. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, it's 6:45, and I'll say thank you to everyone for joining. And just remember, if you're able to up your if you're able and want to up your membership level, please just let us know, and we can help you do that. And we got a lot of events going on at the farm coming up. We're getting an email out to you about those tomorrow. There's a movement medicine dance class on Sunday morning, and some herbal workshops coming up as well. We're going to send you those details by email. So thank you all so much for joining, and I'll see you next month again. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mute
Bye.
all. Thank you.